Hi everyone, welcome back to the Work Well podcast. Today on the show, I'm delighted to welcome Fania Stoney. Fania is co-founder and consultant with Healthy Place to Work. Fania works closely with organizations to guide them through the healthy place process and helps them understand their current investment. That's all so that they can move away from a tick box style offering, which I really welcome, and moving away from that towards implementing a wide-ranging and evidence-based health strategy. This episode is brought to you with thanks to the Fruit People. So the Fruit People are leading the way in workplace nutrition, both in office and remotely. Check out thefruitpeople.ie for more. And it's with thanks to the Fruit People, we have a delicious fresh fruit and healthy snack pack to give away to one lucky listener to this episode. To find out how to enter, go to workwellpodcast.com, find the link to this episode with Fania, and you'll find the competition details at the bottom of the article. Now sit back and enjoy my chat with Fania Stoney. Fania, hello and welcome to the Work Well podcast.
Hey Brian, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Thankfully, work's busy, so that's all good. And then personal life is about to change quite a lot. So I'm actually 35 weeks pregnant. So
wow, congratulations!
So, yeah, thanks very much. I feel like a quarantine cliche, but hey, look, it's exciting for us nonetheless. So yeah, life about to change quite considerably, but really looking forward to it. So
fantastic. Yeah, we're one step ahead of you here at Workwell HQ. We're 38 weeks pregnant, so
absolutely amazing. Congratulations. Yeah, there'll be a whole new host of like healthy babies coming into the world.
That's it.
Clearly we all just need new employees for our businesses, right? So we just need kind of the next round. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, that's fantastic news and thanks. Exciting time, as things start to open up, as the economy for one, but as kind of businesses. We're coming into the summer months. The vaccine is all on the way. It's a really exciting time. So yeah, absolutely. Listen, the very best of luck with everything.
Right back at you. Yeah.
Thanks a million. And how have the last few months, the last 12 months or so been? Because you're a healthy place to work, great place to work. Tell us a little bit about the businesses first and your own role there.
Yeah, brilliant. So thankfully, we've been busy, right? So it's kind of bizarre to think when you think back to this time last year. I was actually packing a bag for a work trip to California, which seems so alien now. Yeah. And obviously COVID hit, and we were really unsure as to whether organizations would still want to invest in people and culture and health and wellbeing and all of that kind of stuff. And they have, right? So we have been kept busy, which is absolutely fantastic. I know personally for me, having plenty to do has really helped my own kind of mental resilience throughout the last 12 months. But yeah, I suppose like to kick off, we might just kind of get into Healthy Place to Work. So I'm one of the co-founders and a consultant with Healthy Place to Work. There's a few of us here in the team in Ireland. And a couple of years ago, we had identified that there was a boom in health and wellbeing in Ireland, right? So like people were beginning to invest in this, organizations were beginning to talk the talk, and maybe weren't so sure about how to walk the walk. So, what did health and wellbeing mean beyond a fruit basket and the odd yoga session and that kind of piece? So we kind of wanted to support organizations in that. And then we also wanted to look at the wealth of secondary research that's out there now, right? So when you kind of first dip your toes into this, there can be quite conflicting cases around, health and wellbeing. Does it have an impact? Does the ROI really happen? That kind of thing. So we wanted to get in underneath that and help organizations become strategic. And that led to us building out the Healthy Place to Work model. And it draws on all of that. So we would always say we're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? So we're kind of pulling together all of that research. And two main elements to what we look at. So the first is what makes a healthy organization. And what we're trying to investigate there is how can an organization sustainably deliver high performance? Like that's really what we're kind of trying to get in underneath. And then looking at the healthy person piece. So the individual sitting within the organization, how is it that they could have the vitality to flourish at work and beyond? And I don't think we had any idea of the implication of the and beyond piece when we were first doing it, and what that's meant in reality for people over the last 12 months. So kind of supporting organizations through that journey and through that trajectory. So yeah, I hope that gives you a kind of an overall sense of us.
It does, yeah. And so let's say if there's a leader listening in, or from an organization, talk us through what would the process look like if we're considering something like this. Like you're providing like the process. What does the process look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And our hope is that it's as simple and straightforward as possible, right? So we kind of, make it so that it's quite easy steps, and every organization follows the same initial steps, and then the follow-up is tailored to the organization itself. So the first piece is kind of, I suppose, kicking off the project. There is somebody within Healthy Place to Work that is fully there to support that organization throughout the whole process. So somebody they can pick up the phone to, somebody they can drop an email to. The first piece is what's called the Healthy Place Survey. So that is a survey that goes out to all employees. So everybody has the opportunity to take part. And that measures kind of the 4 key pillars of the employee experience as we've defined it in the model. So we look at the level of purpose people have around their work. So I understand what my role is, I know how it fits into the organization, and I'm in the right role and organization for me. So that's kind of the piece that we're looking at there. We then measure the levels of mental resilience. And what we're really, I suppose, looking to get in underneath here is how much of a learning mindset exists within the organization. So how people can have the mental plasticity necessary to kind of develop and grow. What does knowledge management look like in the organization, and how do people experience that? Do people feel equipped to make good decisions around job, career, health? How does the organization support that kind of piece? So they're the kind of ones that we're looking at from a mental resilience point of view. A big part of our model is relationships and connections. So we look at how people rate the relationships they have with their colleagues and peers, and what that looks like. That kind of key relationship that people would have with their manager. So do they feel supported? Do they feel kind of equipped around that? And then I suppose there's that relationship with the organization. Okay, so organizations want creative, committed, loyal, insert buzzword here, right? People. But if people don't feel that they belong and that they can be who they are, they're unlikely to unlock that for organizations. So we want to give them a measure of where that is. And then the sense of kind of giving back to something wider than yourself, your level of social well-being. We've kind of, again, seen in the secondary research that your volunteering and kind of that giving back piece actually has big outcomes for your long-term health. So kind of we wanted to make sure we had a measure of that as well. And then the final piece, which is, I suppose, where 90% of people's heads go when they hear Healthy Place to Work, we also measure bits around physical health, diet, fitness, but we really wanted to get into things like the work environment. Is it energizing? Is it safe? And then the kind of recovery mechanisms as well. So how are we making sure that we're taking those moments to pause, we're recovering, and we're learning in as organizations? Again, that idea of building into sustainability. And if you want to perform at a high level, you have to build in those rest and recovery measures, right? So that's the survey, and that gets pushed out from our side. We kind of do all the heavy lifting for that from an organizational point of view. And while that's going on, the organization fills out pretty short kind of submission, 3 main questions. We want to know, how is health and well-being part of the strategy, right? So our ambition is that this isn't something that's going to sit in the corner or happen with one team. This is really embedded in the organization. So what are the values? What's the strategy of the business? And how is this a part of that? Now, organizations are at different stages in that, and we help them with it, but that's what we want to know. What are they choosing to promote as a healthy culture? So what does it mean for them? Again, not a copy and paste exercise. Everybody's going to approach this slightly differently. So we want to kind of get a sense of what does a healthy place to work mean for the organization? And then what are the actual supports that they're putting in place? How are they measuring it? What are those metrics? How do they know things are a success? How do they know things are working? And the idea being that we're kind of building an upward cycle. So employees fill out the survey, somebody in the organization answer those 3 questions. All of that comes back into us. Our data team kind of reviews the data. We can do things like benchmark people against size, industry, all of that kind of good stuff. There's another team that looks at the submission itself. And then we go back out to the organization and present those results and kind of give them a sense of, here's your strengths, here's your opportunities, here's what we're seeing in other organizations, here's some opportunities for a practice build. Very hard to tell an organization before what we're going to find, but once we found it, we can really kind of tailor the support then. So we deliver that session. And then for those organizations who reach, we have a minimum standard that an organization needs to reach to be considered to be a healthy place to work. And for those who reach that, they can then carry the brand. So we will certify them as a healthy place to work. And they can carry our logo. And again, we'll support them around integrating it into their employee value proposition, building it into a part of their employer brand. And there's ongoing support there to make sure they're getting, I suppose, best use out of the investment that they've made. So I've made 4 key steps into quite a long piece, but there are 4 key steps and they're relatively straightforward.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, there's a lot there. Really interesting stuff. I like the survey idea from what you were saying from the survey and kind of the pillars. A couple of things I took from that was I can certainly see where the World Health Organization, the pillars of well-being, they're all covered. The mental well-being, physical well-being, as you mentioned, and often overlooked, the social well-being. Yeah. I can see those very much covered. And also, it almost reminded me the way you were speaking there about, I love Dan Pink, in particular, his book Drive and, Motivation 3.0. Yeah. And the 3 drivers being purpose, which you called out clearly. And also you're touching on the autonomy and the mastery piece there. So I really felt that coming through from the survey you were talking about there. I'm not sure if it was informed by anything like that, but it certainly feels like that's all that's covered in your survey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what we really wanted to encourage people to think about was, what are all of the things that are having an impact on my health and well-being as I sit in an organization, right? So that level of kind of both personal accountability, but also things that people don't often necessarily equate with health, and again, like the damping around purpose. And I think there's a lot of talk, and then it's like, what does that actually mean for me, right? So like, if I'm talking about purpose in my role or feeling congruent or whatever that is, what are the kind of things I could be thinking about? So yeah, absolutely. We tried to take in as much of what had already been done and kind of pool that all together and bring it out and make it a living piece. The flip of it then is all of the statements are designed that they can springboard conversations, right? So I know what my opportunities to learn are. So if I'm a people manager sitting in an organization and my team comes back and that's low, you can go and have that conversation. So, okay, so I'd like to know, what would opportunity to learn look like for you? How can we support you in that? What would that look like? So again, we're not only kind of measuring it, but we're actually giving people that springboard for action to make sure they're kind of driving forward with improvement as well.
Excellent. Yeah. And then you manage all that, the fun stuff then in the background, the data analysis, the benchmarking. Is there, Sky Ireland have an interesting model, you've kind of touched on it there. It's not necessarily the typical well-being markers, but that when they're analyzing internally, they do look at the career progression opportunities. That's something that can really impact your well-being. They look at your manager relationships, so relationship with your manager, for example. And an output actually in their surveys, completely anonymized, but for the entire organization, they have an overall well-being score over year on year, and let's out of 100. And let's say in 2019, it was 80 overall. So they're looking year on year to try and improve that. They want to get up to 81, 82, 83. Is that something you're doing in the survey, or are there kind of completely separate fields that you're bringing back?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, like a lot of organizations approach us because this is something they want to improve in, right? So, and I suppose we have, you can often have two versions of events. So one is an organization who are coming from maybe a relatively standing start. They don't know where to go. They don't know what investment would look like. They wouldn't even know how to define health, right? And they're not even sure. They might not even have defined their own culture, let alone like what health and well-being might mean from that perspective. So the hope is that this gives them a framework that they can really kind of drive on with. We would then, and again, that focuses on continuous improvement. A lot of what we try to help organizations do is identify, okay, well, what are you doing really well at the moment? And we can learn from and implement, across the line. And then where are the opportunities for growth and change and kind of driving a new type of experience for employees. We then have organizations who are probably maybe more mature, right? And they've got an established program and, they've got a good sense themselves of how they've chosen to approach this. Like the likes of Sky Ireland, we actually did a bit of work with Sky a couple of years ago. And they have their own models, right? They have their own approaches. Like I'm thinking of if somebody wants to check out a particularly good one, Version 1 or another organization who have a very kind of mature model around health and well-being. And what we can do there is basically like collapse the way that we look at it and rebuild it under what's going to be useful for them, right? So we can actually pick out a couple of our survey statements that are going to be key metrics, key indicators of success in their model. And then like that, they then change that metric to be like, okay, now we want to improve based on our model, based on your data. How is it that we can chip away at that year on year? And it's been a fascinating exercise for us, right? So kind of having either end of that spectrum has given us so much learning and insight. And then we hope to kind of bring that to organizations who we continue to work with.
What's the very first step then for an organization? People listening in, they're probably thinking, we're nowhere near a Sky or a Version 1. We're not ready for that at all. Is there any way, first of all, for them maybe to get an idea of, if they're ready to apply for something like this? Is it a simple conversation with yourselves?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I'd say that you wouldn't be alone if you're thinking, oh, I'm not ready. Like we hear I'm not ready a lot, right? Or the other one is I'm like, I get this, but I'm not sure leadership would get this, or how would I kind of pitch this in even internally, or, I understand the need for health and well-being in my organization, but I'm not sure anybody else does, right? And so we would always say the first thing to do is come and have a chat with us. So come and have a chat, give us a sense of where you are. The fact you're having the conversation means you're actually further ahead than you think you are, right? Because you're already beginning to think this way. And while the 4 steps remain the same for any organization, what we do is very bespoke. So we will meet you where you are. So it might be that the first step for an organization is us getting on a Zoom call with the leadership team, being like, okay, so let me give you a sense of what we do. Here's how it links into business performance. This is why we talk about sustainability. This is why we're talking about strategy and objectives. And that can really help to lend credibility to the person who's beginning to kind of start that conversation internally. For some, it might be, no, I've got the buy-in, but we've no idea where to go. Great, right? So let's kick off the survey. Let's give ourselves a benchmark and a baseline of where we are right now. And then let's help you build out the ambition for where you want to be. Let's put you in touch with somebody who's in a similar position about 12 months ago, who we have in the healthy community, So there are many ways that we can kickstart that. But yeah, those 4 straightforward steps apply, but how we manage that is very much bespoke to the relationship within the organization.
Very good. Yeah. For an organization then that's gone through the process, there's certain criteria, as you said, that they need to meet. Will you work with, if they're just below that, are you working with them to get them to that level? Is that how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is about when we come back and do that results presentation, quite often it's identifying areas of action, that kind of piece. And the follow-up support is tailored to where their data is signposting, So for some organizations, it might be, how do we have a more consistent experience amongst our people managers? And for some, it's, okay, actually, in these departments, we've kind of got it figured out, but, there's definitely something not translating for these departments. How can we kind of make sure there's a consistent experience across the board? And then for some, it's, with the best will in the world, there's investment going on, but it's not landing. So where is it that we can better place that investment and kind of give people a sense of, okay, well, what you're doing. So like you talked about the kind of the learning and development piece, right? So your investment in learning and development is really landed with people and your data is really strong on it. So we don't need to touch your learning and development piece, but people don't feel particularly in control of their work. So what is that about, and how we can get underneath that, and how, if we can give people a better sense of control, we're more likely to unlock their discretionary effort, and we're more likely to see that kind of data go up year on year. So it really is quite pinpointed, the kind of actions that people can take off the back of the data collection.
Very good, very good. And for an organization then that meets the criteria, they're accredited as a healthy place to work.
Yeah.
What's next then? Is there an incentive for them? They're at a decent level, I'd imagine now, but as you know well, a lot of the listeners know, workplace well, you don't just get your accreditation or all of a sudden
that's
it, we're done. Relax, let's get the beer, crack open the beers now and put the feet up.
Yeah.
Is there an incentive then to improve, the kind of continuous improvement? Is that kind of built into the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So whether you like it or not, we're going to be back in a year's time, right? So it's a big part of what we do, and we make sure that we're seeing that commitment to continuous improvement. So for some, yes, they've reached it, and we'll support them around activating that brand and getting it out there, part of their employer brand, part of the employee value proposition. But we're going to come back and we're going to make sure that we're seeing both the action that you've taken in the last 12 months. What does that look like? How are we building on the practice that we're already in place? And we're going to survey everybody again, right? So I suppose we've kind of learned over the time that one of the worst things that you can do is start something like this and put it on a shelf, right? And be like, well, that was great, thanks very much, see you later. And actually a huge part of the credibility of an overall health and wellbeing process, but specifically something like this, is you said, we listened, we demonstrate action as an organization. So there's one thing doing it for us, the bigger piece is actually doing it for your people, and how you can kind of actively demonstrate that listening and progressing and acting on the feedback. That's actually what's going to differentiate the good and the great, right? And really making sure that you're kind of committed to that action moving forward. And like you say, if this becomes a tick box, then we failed, right?
Yeah.
And we very much want to make sure it's kind of integrated, strategic, it's getting good metrics for people. To give you a sense of it, we've had a couple of organizations who've taken the Healthy Place to Work data and done a kind of a desktop analysis and mapped it onto different metrics that they've got running throughout the organization. One organization in particular did it with their sales teams. So they took their team data from a Healthy Place to Work point of view and did a direct kind of analysis with the sales data, and the healthiest teams had the best sales returns. They were like, okay, so something here is working, right? And then the piece that we came in to do with them was, so what is it about these groups that's working really well that the rest of the people can learn, as opposed to let's go down into the groups that maybe it's not working and try and fix it. It's what's working really well that we can translate across the board and kind of bring people all up into that high performance space.
Very good. Yeah. So if you're continuing through the process year on year, you can look back and see where you were, look for improvements across that data. Very good.
Yeah.
You've mentioned employer brand now a couple of times there. How important is well-being as part of an employer brand? And then would you have any advice for how best an organization can articulate their well-being offering as part of that brand?
Yeah. I know for anybody sitting on the call who's part of a hiring process, a people development team, anything like that, I think the one piece that we're hearing constantly back, and if we take a pre-COVID view for a second, was at an interview, who's being interviewed, the prospective candidate or the organization, right? And one of the things that people were increasingly asking about was, how do you support well-being, or what does work-life balance look like for this organization? And now during COVID and post-COVID world, it's become even more heightened, right? So how did your organization handle COVID-19 from a health and wellbeing point of view? What did you do to support people? And what are your plans for the future? And I know that's probably the trickiest one to answer at the moment, but there's an expectation now that organizations are sitting up and paying attention to things like this. And we know that talent is making decisions about where to go based on how an organization can answer that question. So, where you can, build in what you're doing from a health and well-being perspective into your employer brand, first of all, it's gonna build out your business case for investing it in the first place. And then when we're making that investment, we want to leverage it. We want to tell the market about it. And we want to tell the market that we actually have a pretty good handle on how it is we're supporting employees, how we're choosing to define health and well-being, and that we can articulate that clearly to them. And I it's really become part of that overall narrative. And I look to the kind of a couple of examples within our own community who have taken on the Healthy Place to Work brand, and they find themselves, with candidates in the interview stage being like, oh, tell me about that. Like, how did you get that process? How did that work? A bit like what we're doing today. What was it that drove you to do that? What does that mean from a prospective employee point of view? And it's just equipping them to have the conversation. Even to turn around and tell somebody that, well, actually, we have quite a strategic approach. This is how we're choosing to define it, is above and beyond what most are kind of able to articulate within the space. So it's definitely kind of having an impact there.
Yeah, very good. I agree with you 100%. They're so important to get that message out there. Talk about what you're doing, promote it, and associate it with your brand. Really important.
Yeah, and there's nothing like, you take a statement from the survey with, that's got a high answer, right? So 95% of people believe, that their work has an impact here. Like, that's not you as an organization saying it, it's your people. And the step up that brings, and that level of kind of employee advocacy and employee voice, again, it's lending a credibility to your narrative or to your employer branding story that you as an organization actually can't do, right? Because it's your people. And again, this is one of the shifts we've seen in reaction to COVID, where a lot of the employer branding stuff was organization driven. It's actually become much more individually driven over the last 12 months. If you, I don't know, like you look at LinkedIn, right? And it's all about personal stuff. And that's a challenge and an opportunity for organizations where they have that kind of data and how they can kind of harness that story. So it's just another tool in the toolbox, and making sure you're kind of leveraging the investment that you are making.
Absolutely. And speaking of brand, the other, I guess, related brand to that many of the listeners will be familiar with, related to Healthy Place to Work, is Great Place to Work. Could you compare and contrast maybe the benefits for an organization that are considering signing up to Healthy Place to Work or Great Place to Work, or both?
Yeah. So we're very original with names. So, it goes without saying, Great Place to Work is a well-established brand in the market at this stage, right? And it's been in the Irish market for a number of years. I suppose the easiest way to differentiate the two is when we look at Great Place to Work has trust at its core. So that's what it's measuring kind of from a model point of view. And it's really based on manager and management behaviors. That's what that model is kind of looking at, measuring, and that's where the action sits. From a Healthy Place to Work point of view, we have learning at the core of the model. So that kind of, again, I know we've talked about it before, but that ability to adapt and be agile, and an individual's ability to learn on the go is what sits at the core of that model. And it's actually based on individual behaviors. There's a lot more I statements in the Healthy Place to Work survey. So they're the kind of two key differentiators. And then which one an organization goes for, like, honestly, it's about the organizational priority, right? So what talent base are they looking to recruit from? What do they want from the process? What are their own outcomes? And then it's a case of almost like, backstepping and seeing which one is the best fit. We have a number of brands who carry both. I guess they solve different parts of the employee puzzle. They have different parts of the employer branding campaign. And often what we would see for those who choose to do both is they would just give both sufficient space, right? So they might run Healthy Place to Work as like a kickoff to the year. Where are we around this, getting their numbers in. And then if they're getting recognized, they can go and tell that to the market and do that. And then they're coming back in the other half of the year around Great and kind of checking in and seeing how that's happening. So, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like the IRFU currently would actually carry both brands, as would version 1. So there's a number of them who are doing it, and they just adapt and change. And it's about the priorities that they have as a business. But always open for the chat around it. That's kind of the best way for people to progress with it, I suppose.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Look, you've got a lot of interesting clients. You've mentioned a few already. Over the last 12 months or so, have you seen them doing anything interesting from a well-being perspective? I imagine you have. Any kind of stories that stand out?
Yeah, I mean, we all did the Zoom quiz fervor, right, at the start of the summer. So there was a part of me that was quite glad when that died a death. I'm not going to lie. It was when you had like the work one and the family one and the friends one, and it was a lot. There's a part of this that was, a lot of organizations didn't reinvent the wheel, right? So what we had to make sure the organizations were doing, or we were supporting organizations to do, was keep the core fundamentals the same. So keeping communication strong, keeping those connections strong, and just figuring out how to adapt them into a new reality. And we've got a really strong mix of clients. So for some of our organizations, their work hasn't actually changed at all. They're still turning up to a warehouse every day, or they're still going into a manufacturing site every day. For some, they've moved to a completely hybrid model where, either individuals are doing a bit of remote and office, or their workforce itself has kind of split into two different types. And then we had the ones who, overnight went from office-based to remote working. And the ability to adapt has really depended on their people, the situations that they found them in. And it's actually that response where stuff has begun to stand out. So I was trying to think of a couple of interesting examples. So one of the organizations we work with went ahead with their strategy away day. And they had it on a walk up to Knock. And one of the leadership team carried a whiteboard on his back up to Knock. Like, now, obviously, this is when we could still, do this kind of stuff, and it was all done at social distance. But this idea of, we're committed to doing our strategy and building that, and that being a part of what we do, but we just had to kind of change the way we did it. Another kind of one that we saw was organizations really wanted to support people to take the time off when they needed it, right? Mm-hmm. So, making sure they're, again, building in those rest and recovery mechanisms. How are we doing that? How are we supporting people? We had one organization in particular who had a real challenge, because their people were turning around and telling them, like, well, that's all well and good, but if I take the day off, I actually come back and I'm a day behind, and I've fallen out of sync with everybody else, and I miss the meetings, and now I'm not sure. And, mm-hmm. actually taking the day was a bigger stressor than being in work, right? So that's a challenge. And company responded. They were like, we hear you, we get it. We are having 7 company shutdown days. Right, and they had 7 between kind of, I think it was April and December. The whole company shut. That was it. Nobody, no work, no client facing stuff. They let their clients know, expectations were set, and they figured it was the only way to actually get people to stop, because it meant that you weren't missing a meeting, and you weren't missing a deadline, and it was just, no, we're closed, that's it. We're off. And I thought that was actually quite clever. And this idea of, it's all well and good to say that you can take the time, but actually actively listening and understanding how that is the lived reality for people, and then responding to that lived reality is really where I suppose we've seen organizations elevate themselves over the last 12 months.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I love that. I've heard a few companies doing that, the company-wide day, if you like. Yeah, really nice way to just
simple, right? But just taking that kind of extra layer.
Yeah, absolutely. But the TikTok one like that, the whiteboard strapped to the back. Somebody else with the water cooler on their back, of course, and then the
coffee. This is it. Yeah, the coffee. Yeah, exactly. The plunge machine.
Yeah, fantastic. Bit of exercise there as well, certainly. What about anything interesting going on in terms of engagement? Are you seeing remote engagement? That's one of the biggest challenges I'm hearing. And so the quizzes aren't doing it for you. They're not doing it for many people. Are you seeing anything interesting there in terms of remote employee engagement?
And again, I mean, this is shifting constantly for people, right? And I think organizations are, I'd say, struggling more now than they did actually in crisis management mode. There was kind of a collective experience in kind of March, April, and, like you said, the kind of the Zoom piece, and now what does it mean? And also, how long is this going to go on for? And, all of that. And again, I would bring this back to the power of active listening. So strong communication between managers and teams, leadership and teams, individuals and other individuals is really going to make the difference for people. And people knowing how they and their work continues to fit in. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. And actually, I think when people have a sense of empowerment and an expectation has been set around their role, even if it's not always good news, at least they know, right? And kind of having those upfront conversations is going to be a big part. New ways of learning has been another big one, right? So a lot of organizations, especially when they were effectively firefighting, right? A lot of the the usual stuff probably fell by the wayside, and now we're beginning to see organizations adapt around maybe like brown bag lunches, where organization somebody might come on and present a new skill that they've picked up throughout the time, or they've got new training programs, or they're beginning to adapt what was once a classroom offering into the virtual world. So those new ways to learn are going to be really key. The relationships piece, of course, is going to continue to be an important one, and I think organizations have begun to see that while they can provide, actually sometimes this is about handing this back out to people, right? So, again, in crisis management, organizations really went full throttle around, we're going to bring everybody together every Friday. And of course, all we're going to want to do is have, pints over Zoom with our colleagues. And now there's been a bit of reflection and saying, okay, well, how is this going to work for you, right? And how, if we're not going to be back together now for the next few months, what are the 2 or 3 things that we could be doing to make sure we're all supporting each other? And we know from some organizations, it's people actually saying, well, actually, can I turn my camera off for meetings? Like, it might be as simple as that, And then the final piece, and I know we probably all know our 5K circles like the backs of our hands at this stage, right? But making sure that we're kind of supporting people around the kind of their physical health, that work-life balance piece, getting out. Because one of the things we're hearing is there is no doubt that people are working hard. The question is that hard work effective, right? So, sitting in front of your laptop for 14 hours, I don't doubt that you're working hard, but you're probably working to your best, right? Mm-hmm. So how organizations are supporting individuals to figure that out for themselves is actually going to do way more for engagement than bringing people together for a Zoom meeting or something like that, So I feel bad before we're hammering Zoom, but Zoom has been great, right? And it's really nice to have it for the interaction as well. Yeah, we literally would be. But it's the active listening piece. Like that's what's going to make sure that you're getting the right engagement to the right people in the right way at the right time. Yeah. And the really good news is you're probably going to have to change it next week. But if you're actively listening, you're going to be able to keep on top of that and keep what's relevant for people out there,
Good point. Yeah, it's going to be different for each organization. Listen, what are your people looking for, and just try and support them there and take it from there. And then maybe it will be quizzes. Maybe it'll be something else.
This is it. I mean, we actually, in our own team, we have a absolutely fantastic quiz master. And last week we had a Jeopardy style quiz with a buzzer. Now, I know I came quite down hard on Zoom quizzes for early in the lockdown, but I mean, turns out I'm horrendously competitive. So I have to say we all really enjoyed our Jeopardy style quiz last week. So it's to not overdo it, but also like listen to people and figure out where they are and what's going to work. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, good point. On that, so you mentioned the new ways of learning, new ways of working. I guess we're all getting used to it. I mean, any thoughts? Let's say a year, 2 years, or 3 years down the road. What will the workplace look like? What will the future work look like? A nice, easy question for you.
Oh yeah, no, and sure, look, I can just look into the crystal ball and figure it all out, right? Like we've got all those answers. I mean, right now, it's hard to envisage a world where we're going to go back to the way it was before, right? I think that's probably the only thing we can be sure about. But what it's going to mean in reality, I think, is still very much up for grabs, right? And up for play. And I know I've alluded to it a lot today, but I don't think organizations can underestimate the power of listening. Okay, so there's a longer term piece, where we're going to be in 3 years, but I actually think there's a critical piece in the next 3 to 6 months. Okay, so in reality, not a lot is probably going to change, right? And there's a guy, Dr. O'Gallagher, who talks about this, and we're probably coming into a longer period of disillusionment right now. So yay, we're going to get there, but it's not quite yet. And, what does that mean for me? And what is those expectations kind of, what are they? So, any leaders or HR people or people managers on the call, I'd be really encouraging them to kind of reflect on, do they know where their people are, right? Like, are you assuming you know what people are going to want, or have you actually had that conversation? Have you gone out and had those active conversations with your people? There's a piece around, yes, we will want to go back to the office in some shape or guise, but do you know within your own team, have you got people who actively want to go back? Because that's a very real thing for people, right? They want to get out of their spare bedrooms, or they're off their kitchen tables and back into an office. There are some people who the transition to remote has been life-changing, the lack of the 3-hour commute or whatever it is. And actually this is something I really want to continue. And then you're going to have this, which is probably what we're going to see in reality, which is a hybrid model, right? So, actual physical space is changing to have reduced people in there, but when people are in there, it's much easier to collaborate with those who aren't with them, or, this hybrid model of both working from home and in the office. But one of the simplest things I'd get people to think about as we move towards that model is, so what is it that people really enjoy about when they come together? Well, it's generally like, sure, I work with Sinead all week, and actually it's really nice to go and have a cup of tea and like just see how our kids are getting on or whatever it is, right? Like that's actually a big positive byproduct of the work that I do, is because I get to actually spend time with my team members. And so an organization sets up a really like fantastic flexible working policy where people can kind of like, pick and choose. And I go into the office and it's on a day where none of my team are in. And I go, oh, like I've come in and all that stuff that I used to enjoy about being in here, they're not here. And we're already seeing some organizations begin to think about actually which teams, when do we want which teams to come in, because we want them to bounce off each other. And then for things like innovation, collaboration, are there groups that we actually need to get back into the same physical space at some stage, just so they have that ability to bounce off each other, So it's going to be like, I don't think it's going to be massive life changes, but it's going to be these small things, the active listening, the knowing where people are, and then the couple of very small things that are going to have a really big impact on how well this next phase of, I suppose, kind of like working life in Ireland is going to work for people.
Yeah, good point there. I hadn't heard that before. So yeah, teams, you might have designated days for teams that are kind of to come into the office. So it's to continue that kind of collaboration that you mentioned. But what it sounds like to me is almost like, as we touched on at the beginning of the conversation, that the power has shifted, or probably has shifted to the employee now, whereas pre-COVID, as you were saying, interviews, the employee or the potential candidate was querying the employer's well-being credentials. Now it's the employee telling the employer, they want to work from home 2 days a week or 3 days a week, whatever it is. So that listening is happening. Employers are really kind of listening. The power's kind of shifted to the employee an awful lot more.
Yeah, and it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out. And you even think about this, that employee level, and then if you think of that people manager level, again, one of the things we've helped a lot of organizations with over the last 12 months is suitability to role, right? So some managers and people leaders who are fantastic in a physical environment have really struggled with the remote thing, right? Because they like the physical interaction and being able to bounce off people and all that kind of stuff. So how is it that we can support their management style now that we're going remote? We also know that there are some managers who really struggle with the idea that people could actually be working if they can't see it, right? So like, how are we making like work really transparent and making sure that people can kind of really key in around that? And then again, it's going to be managing this hybrid and that kind of thing. The other piece, just to kind of throw into the mix, is especially when you look at the national narrative, it's been very dominant around families, right? And the kind of juggling homeschooling and kids and small spaces and how that's all worked. And it's been such a necessary conversation, but there's a much wider experience going on. And we've worked with organizations who have, people living in flat shares with 7 people who are having to do conference calls from the bathroom because it's the only quiet place in the house, right? And they're like, get me back to an office. I don't want to do this from the shower anymore. Or, people who are single living at home and quite isolated, right? And their main outlet for relationship, for social relationships was actually work. People who've moved to Ireland from different countries who now find themselves, unable to broaden out their network because they can't go and meet people, right? So there's such a varied experience, and making sure we're understanding our people and where they need and what they need from the organization for it to work for them, and then being very clear on our expectations from an organizational point of view. It's going to make the difference for people, I think. And I think it's going to make the difference about whether people stay in your organization as you say, as the economy opens up again, as we get going again, and I've no doubt that we will. And we're going to be back into retention and recruitment conversations very soon, and you want to be making sure you're giving your people the best shot to be supported and to stick with you. So yeah,
very true. It's such a mix of situations out there, isn't there? So, but it all comes back to that active listening piece that you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
As well as your healthy place to work role, you're also your committee member for Network Dublin.
I'm indeed, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and about Network Dublin.
Yeah, so it's brilliant, right? So I joined Network Dublin, I guess it's kind of 3 years ago at this stage. So it's a fantastic group of kind of professional women, from business owners to employees. And yeah, when I first joined, it was mainly for to meet other people, and they did fantastic kind of events, and you got to meet such a variety of different people. But what really stood out to me about the network was it's underpinned by this ethos of support, right? So how can we all support each other in whatever our professional ventures are? And inevitably there's a bit of the personal thrown in there as well. So last year, when an opportunity came up to kind of take a more active role in it on the committee, I jumped at it, and I kind of stuck with it this year. Although they might have to do without me for a couple of months, but I'm sure they'll be all right. But again, it's all transitioned to digital now. So we have, monthly coffee mornings, and it's literally like an hour where people come and shoot the breeze. New members can kind of tell us a bit about who they are and what they do in the business. It's a fantastic mentoring program. So if you have a specific need, website development, somebody in the network is going to be a website developer, so you can kind of build those connections as well. There's awards at local and national level, but we've got a fantastic president in Orla this year, and the focus really is creating that safe space for people to come and just go, what's up, what are we doing? It's a bit of a nightmare at the moment, but here's how we're driving forward, here's how we can support each other. And then also doing the events that bring that thought leadership and expertise to kind of people. So no, it's a fantastic group. I'm sorry, Brian, I'm not sure you can be a member, but no, I'd encourage any women out there who are kind of looking for a network. I personally have got a lot out of it. So yeah, it's a good group.
And it's whether you're self-employed, whether you're in employment, full-time, part-time, it's for any kind of woman in business.
Yeah, that's it. And it was, I suppose, one of the things that drew me in, because I often bridge that a little bit, right? So having done the kind of co-founder piece of Healthy and kind of done that business, setting up a business and driving it, and then but also being an employee. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of cool to get that hybrid within the network itself. So yeah, no, it's a really good example of people coming together.
Excellent. No, I'm a big fan of that. I mean, pretty much my own workplace wellbeing community set up with that kind of in-person meetups initially, onto the webinars, onto the podcast. So I'm a big fan of kind of the networks and the communities. It can be powerful.
Seems like a long time ago outside the Bord Gosh, doesn't it? The Bank of Ireland building at the Bord Gosh, for events and that kind of stuff. The one that always sticks with me, because it's such a cool building, is Windmill Lane.
Love it.
Yeah, they
Beautiful,
were. We'll get back there soon, though, right? It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
It will indeed. It will indeed. I'm looking forward to that, I must say. Listen, you've been very, very generous with your time, Fania. One last question, and it's probably more important. I ask this of every guest, but it's particularly important for yourself. Look, you're busy. You're extremely busy. How are you looking after your own well-being at present?
Yeah, well, I've also got the perfect excuse, right? So 35 weeks pregnant. So to be honest, I Okay, look, it's a struggle for us all, right? If we're being brutally honest about it, I think, of all the things to try and manage at the moment, managing our own well-being is very, very tough. I know personally for me, keeping busy is a big part of it, but it's what I've called keeping busy with boundaries, right? So it's closing the laptop, getting out for the walk, knowing when to take your breaks. I now have a very like live, not that it's a reason to take a break, I have to, right? So every now and again I've just got to go and take a bit of a rest and come back. Keeping the conversations going, having the chats with the people around you, and when it's safe, like when you're not being assaulted by bins rolling down the road in the breeze like they were yesterday, and getting out and getting that blast of fresh air, and just looking forward to the year ending better than it started. But yeah, a bit of a mishmash answer there, but all the little bits I think that come together to help.
Brilliant. Well, listen, the very best of luck with everything. Very exciting times. Wishing you and your partner the very best. And we look forward to hearing about the new healthy arrival in the near
Yeah,
future.
and look, same to you,
Thanks.
and good luck to you and your other half. And yeah, the next podcast will be comparing parenting tips, I guess.
We will indeed. It'll be a
yeah,
parenting podcast. Yeah, great idea.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Listen, Fania, just before you go, where can people go to find out more about yourself
Oh yeah,
and how things work?
So healthyplacetowork.ie, that's our main website. That's the kind of main source of all the information. They can see kind of different client journeys, that kind of piece. LinkedIn is probably our most active presence. So again, Healthy Place to Work Ireland on LinkedIn. And I'm more than happy to connect to anybody personally who and LinkedIn probably is the easiest way actually to do that. I have a notoriously difficult name to spell, so emails just don't get to me. Much easier when I can just provide it. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn, drop me a line, and happy to pick up any conversations that people would like to have.
Fantastic. We'll include all those details in the show notes that go out with the episode as well. Fania, thanks so much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Brian. Talk to you soon.
Hello, everyone. Brian here again. A big thank you for listening right to the end of this episode of the Work Well podcast. I want to give a big shout out to our partners, the Fruit People, who are leading the way in workplace nutrition, both in office and remotely. You can check them out at thefruitpeople.ie. And it's with thanks to the Fruit People that we have a delicious fresh fruit and healthy snack pack to give away to one lucky listener for each episode of season 3. To find out how to enter, go to workwellpodcast.com and find the link to the latest podcast episode. Finally, are you interested in diving deeper in the area of workplace well-being? Why wouldn't you? You need to check out the Work Well Institute. The Work Well Institute is an online hub for all your workplace well-being, education, and training needs, whether you're an individual or an organization. Head on over to workwellinstitute.org, where you'll find out the details on all the courses available, including my flagship program, Developing a Workplace Wellness Program That Lasts. Check it out at workwellinstitute.org. Thanks again for listening. The original music for this podcast was composed by my friend Greg Clifford. Thank you, Greg. Remember to work well, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Work Well podcast.